provided a short list, I think.
Call this September 20th, 2021 Planning Board meeting to order, please. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Could I get an approval of tonight's agenda, please?
You said motion to
Linda,
approve?
thank you. Second?
I second.
Okay, thank you, Jan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. Wes, I don't think we probably have any public comment signed up, except for, I see one council member over there in the corner. Well, I think we'll scoot on into old business, which,
We had the, I'm sorry, Mr.
oh,
Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Minutes as
Approval
well.
of the minutes.
Oh, so anxious to get started with.
Yes, sir.
Okay, minutes. Didn't have them in front of me, that's why. Has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes?
Yes. Yep.
Any corrections noted?
Nope.
I didn't see anything other than a typo here or there, and that was very minimal this time, so if no one's got any objection, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 19, 2021.
So moved.
Okay. Jan, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay. Now, on the staff report that we got, and it was the revised staff report ahead of last month's meeting. I'm going to get Wes to kind of pick up towards the end of the staff analysis, I guess, right there where it says, in an effort to make the town's sign requirements content neutral. Can you read that and then just briefly catch us back up to speed what we're looking at?
Yes, sir. This is ZTA 2108, continuing discussion. In the staff report that was provided for the August meeting, the revised staff report for the revised ZT 218, which was posted on the website the day of that meeting. In an effort to make the town sign requirements content neutral, the proposed language addresses signage based on the applicable zoning district the subject property lies within. Town staff has made a couple of revisions since you received the ZTA, which include carrying forward the prohibition of vehicle signs and separating the requirements for residential uses and non-residential uses in residential zoning districts.
Okay. Thanks, Wes. I thought maybe the approach to what we're going to talk about in the ZTA 2108, we kind of tick off a few things that we have in our packet. First one that I would like to look at, and we'll just kind of briefly go through any kind of concerns and questions before we start actually looking at the contents of the ZTA. It might help things along, but Anyway, the first thing I would like for us to look at would be the Reed versus Town of Gilbert case comments. Starting with what Codewright had put forth. And what I noted of relevant, pertinent information out of Codewright and then the town attorney on below that and on the next page. It basically is talking about the Codewright talks about time, place, and manner of how signs are allowed in municipalities like ours. So what the Codewright is saying, of course, is that they're referring back to Reed versus the town of Gilbert. It was in the Supreme Court, and in practice, I'm reading the last sentence of the first paragraph. It says, in practice, most sign standards are focused on aesthetics and thus will not pass the test of strict scrutiny, which means maybe in another form, it's not content neutral. It goes on to say in the second paragraph that sign standards may not distinguish between, quote, commercial signs and non-commercial signs, since doing so requires the sign's message. Thirdly, the court has ruled that speaker-based standards, sign standards that relate to a particular kind of use, like signs for a restaurant or signs for a vacation rental, are not content neutral and must also pass strict scrutiny. Once again, it says, next paragraph down, it says, one of the best ways to address this new court precedent is to maintain the time, place, and manner provisions for signs that most communities, including Southern Shores, already have, and then revise any specific sign type standards into a set of generic time, place, and manner sign standards. Fortunately, the town's current sign standards are well organized in this fashion and will only require some moderate adjustment to avoid strict scrutiny doctrine. And then the town attorney went on and elaborated a bit more, but looking back on the next page, first paragraph on the next page, town attorney said, generally, it is probably best practice to avoid the issue altogether by having content-neutral sign regulations. And then in the following paragraph, the last of that paragraph, however, again, it's easy enough to avoid the issue entirely by having regulations which do not address the use of the property and instead rely on the zoning district designations of the property, as the new ordinance provisions seem to do. So I guess to sum that up, it sounds like we're on the right path to take what we've got here in this ZTA and get into it a bit more and see if we need to adjust what we've got so far. Did everyone, or does anyone have any questions for Wes, or we need to talk about in that Reed versus Town of Gilbert case, those two items from Codewright and Town Attorney? Any questions we need to look in on? Okay. Did everyone get the School of Government blog from Adam Lovelady, who was the fellow that did our the first part of our workshop last week? I would like to briefly go over some highlights that I pulled out of his two blogs, or I guess it's one blog, but he just separated it out. So if you look at the very first page, which is called in the blog that Wes has done, it's, let's see, it begins with, it's that time of year again, leaves are falling, campaign signs are rising. Everybody got that? Okay. And Mr. Lovelady points out that this can be a confusing topic because of the ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court in Reed versus Town of Gilbert, and because of the overlapping authority between local governments and the North Carolina Department of Transportation. Legal issues affecting the regulation of campaign signs include, and he's got 3 bullets there, free speech protections, limiting the regulation of sign content, differences between regulations on private property and regulations on public property, and lastly, differences between regulations on state mandated rights of way and municipally maintained rights of way. And then he goes on to start into the free speech issues in that same case. But he also gleans out of that, in contrast, content neutral regulations of time, place, and manner of speech are subject to intermediate scrutiny and more likely to survive judicial review. I'm not quite sure I understand what intermediate means in that particular case. Wes, you got any distinction between what an intermediate scrutiny is versus?
Subject to intermediate scrutiny and are more likely to survive judicial review.
Yeah. What is intermediate
I'm not-
judicial scrutiny?
I'm not sure. I
Anybody?
don't think I can answer that
Yeah.
for you.
I couldn't get exactly what he was talking about there, but anyway, the time, place, and manner is probably the thing that he is highlighting the most, that we will be relative to what we're doing, is how we regulate the time and the place and the manner. So going on to the next page, it has temporary signs on private property. Under that heading, that would be temporary signs on private property in general. He's not talking about campaign signs or political signs in election season. It is temporary signs on private property. And what he speaks to there in the very first paragraph is that an ordinance of regulation may set reasonable content neutral limits on non-commercial speech, including political signs on private property. Such restrictions might include limits on the size, the number, and location of temporary non-commercial signs. Obviously, that's what we're going to be looking at. But then the next paragraph down, starting with importantly, it calls out a case that was challenged, that a person was prevented from posting a sign protesting the Gulf War. And it just goes on and says, limiting property owners to only 2 campaign signs was overly restrictive. So that's something that we need to kind of keep in mind when we look in these tables later on. Goes on to say, can a local government set a time limit on temporary non-commercial signs on private property? Durational limits that are not overly restrictive likely may be used, but local governments should be wary of the potential legal pitfalls. Even before the Reed courts around the country struck down durational limits that were too short, routinely striking down sign codes that limited campaign signs to less than 60 days. This is a reminder that anytime the government is regulating non-commercial speech, it must not be overly restrictive, especially as related to residential property and possible political speech. What we pull out of that would be 60 days is the bare absolute minimum that Mr. Lovelady would say would work for a town. We have, I think, 90 days now on the books on our current ordinance, and it's proposed 90 calendar days in the new version of the ZTA that we're going to be looking at. So, anyway, now,
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just a simple Google search looking for intermediate scrutiny. This is based on Cornell Law School website. Intermediate scrutiny is a test courts will use to determine a statute's constitutionality. Intermediate scrutiny is only invoked when a state or the federal government passes a statute which negatively affects certain protected classes. To pass intermediate scrutiny, the challenged law must, one, further an important government interest, and two, and must do so by means that are substantially related to that interest. It goes on beyond that, but that's something I'm not aware of.
I figured you'd have it on the tip of your tongue.
I apologize, sir.
Leave it to Google, right? Well, thanks. I mean, I don't think we really have to be too worried about meeting that criteria quite so much in our statute. Does anybody have anything on the first section that I kind of cherry picked from? If not, I'm going to get you to look at Adam Lovelady's second part of his blog, which is temporary signs in public rights of way. This has a bit more pertinent information because it is election period here in Southern Shores, all over North Carolina. But it says, starting with temporary signs in public rights of way, this section explores statutory authority and free speech considerations for regulations of temporary signs in the public right of way in North Carolina. Basically, the rules that the North Carolina, the state of North Carolina has specific rules for signs in public right-of-ways controlled and maintained by the North Carolina Department of Registration. That is found in that general statute 136-32. And it outlines general prohibition on posting signs on public highways and authorizes North Carolina DOT to remove impermissible signs. The statute then sets forth rules allowing for political signs. This is what would be pertinent for this time of year for us. Political signs are permitted into NC DOT right-of-way during the time period from 30 days prior to the first day of one-stop early voting until the 10th day after the primary election season. This year, that date is September 14th, and it ends on November the 12th, which gives you exactly 60 days. It goes on to say, no sign shall be permitted in the right-of-way of fully controlled access highway. No sign shall be closer than 3 feet from the edge of the pavement of the road. No sign shall obscure motorist visibility at an intersection. No sign shall be higher than 42 inches above the edge of the pavement. I circled 42 inches when I was highlighting this, and I'd like for us to remember that 42 inches when we look at the height of temporary signs going into the CPA. No sign shall be larger than 864 square inches, which is a sign that measures 24 by 36. So 2 feet by 3 feet equals 864 square inches. And no sign shall obscure or replace another sign. Notably, the individual placing the sign must obtain permission of the owner of the property fronting the right-of-way where the sign is enacted. Although there is no detail about the form of evidence of such permission. So, I mean, you know, it's just kind of a gray little area there, but it's a regulation that the North Carolina DOT has passed for election time. Let's see. NCDOT rule as written is subject to constitutional challenge under the Reed decision. So what that tells me is that NCDOT may be on shaky ground. They're not there yet, but they possibly could be on state shaky ground as far as Mr. Lovelady is concerned. At this point, it's not our call because we have nothing to do with it. The town really can't enforce anything that happens on DOT road frontage. Okay, so local rules. Let's see. Yeah, I'll finish reading that NCDOT rule as written, subject to constitutional challenge under the Reed decision. The statute allows political sign, defined as any sign that advocates for political action, but not other non-commercial signs. This preferential treatment of one category of non-commercial speech is precisely the kind of content-based regulation that the court struck down in Reed. So, for what it's worth. Okay, under General Statute 160A-296, North Carolina municipalities have broad authority over their public streets, including the power to regulate the use of the streets and the duty to keep the streets free from unnecessary obstructions. This authority includes the power to regulate signs in the right-of-way. Moreover, the statute about NCDOT authority confirms that cities may use their police powers to adopt regulations of signs in the rights-of-way within their jurisdiction and maintained by the city. A municipality such as ours may prohibit temporary signs in the municipal right-of-way or permit them subject to certain even-handed content-neutral restrictions. As with other restrictions, this may include limits on size, location, time frame, and other content-neutral aspects. A municipality may permit non-commercial temporary signs in the right-of-way, but still restrict commercial temporary signs. I think that what we have on the books right now is minimal for addressing any kind of campaign signs, obviously. The 90 days is in there, but it's you got to prove that it's been out there longer than 90 days. So I'm not sure of how much value that is, but anyway, I think the meat of Mr. Lovelady's blog was just to let you know that a town like ours can regulate where signs are. If we want to allow them in the right of way, we can allow them in the right of way, but we just got to change the current rule. I don't think we're advocating for that here, but the duration and the size and what the sign is, what type of sign it is what we're faced with the ZTA 2108. So anyway, I would say we maybe get into the ZTA as it's, and I'm hoping everybody's gotten the revised edition, because we started out in this conversation last month with short notice on this revised edition. So everybody got revised. You got it in your packet, probably.
Yeah. Is that the August 9? Is that the revised?
What'd you say, John?
What was the date on the revised?
It was 8/16/21, and can you pull up the last page, Wes? Because that'll tell you if you've got, it'll have a chart on it.
Yeah, it's actually 8, 9. Yeah, John, I think you'll be okay with that. 8, 9, it's the back page. The
Okay, I
chart.
got 2, 8, 9, so I'm sure one of them's right.
Yeah, the back, the very last page.
Yeah, if your back page looks like that, you have the revised.
Revised is 12 pages, 12 out of 12 pages.
Yeah.
And it also, for all the tables, it has table A, B, C, D, or E. I have an extra copy if anybody needs one.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I had a few notes from the last
Yeah.
discussion you all had. And I'm not sure how you want to move forward, but
Yeah, go ahead.
I did have move for sale and for lease signs in table B to temporary signs.
Let's see, let me,
Properties that are actively listed for sale and properties that are actively listed for rent or lease had moved to temporary table, ? So that was something that was considered.
well,
You're on page 10.
what table was that on?
Table B is page 10.
Okay. Yeah, I remember we had that discussion, but I don't think we ever resolved anything, did we?
No, sir.
Okay.
And then the other I had was change the square footage allowed for same table, table B, properties where the lawful construction, alteration, remodeling, or demolition of any building or use is taking place. Change the number of signs per lot from 3 to 5. And then I had maximum surface area for a single sign, 3 instead of 6.
Right.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Robert.
Okay.
So that was some discussion that we had at the last meeting.
Yeah, and we had gone over some comments that John had that we felt like was addressed on digital signs on page 5, and then and I've got to check by page 4 and page 5 on John's comments. So I'm assuming that we address those.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have where we made any changes. I think it
Yeah.
was determined that what we have was in the ordinance or what's here,
Well,
what's currently provided is sufficient.
We'll push on through this thing, and because we definitely want to go over it, again, before we start doing any voting. The vehicle signs, I think we had that sorted out, but we'll clarify that when we get to that section. And then Tony sent in a couple of things that he had concerns about as far as corner locations, which we can talk about when we get into that table. And then I think the third thing that Tony put in was relating to the previous issue of the ZTA. Because John had the same concern that things weren't adding up. The surface area, 3 times 6 doesn't equal 21. Not a big deal. I mean, it's. Okay, well, let's just kind of briefly flip through the ZTA, if you don't mind starting on the front page there, Wes. Okay. Now we'll get through all the whereases and therefore, and basically go down to beginning of definitions at the bottom of the page. And it defines what a sign means. Does anybody have any issue with the definition of a sign? I would have, one question about the banner and flag or pendant, but I guess that could be for later on when we actually get into, the different zoning areas. I didn't see anything that looked too out of whack in the definition of a sign. I think it's pretty encompassing. And then the commercial, the non-commercial charity, off-site, on-site, real estate, they've all been stricken from the current ordinance if we adopt this CTA. Sign temporary means a sign intended to display messages of a transitory or temporary nature, portable signs, or any sign not permanently embedded in the ground or not permanently affixed to a building or sign structure that is permanently embedded in the ground are considered temporary signs. And then it goes on to say what a temporary sign is. I think our question the last time was, how do we define a permanent sign? Because there is no definition of permanent. I would like to see some language that we've defined what a temporary sign is, but I think we need.
Is that something that would be permitted? In other words, there's no permit for a 3-foot residential sign. So would a permanent sign have to be permitted?
I don't know, Wes.
You all could recommend either way, but I would say a permanent sign probably should require a permit. Certainly in a commercial district.
Yeah.
In a residential district,
Well,
I don't know.
yeah. I think in a residential district, I'm thinking of the name of someone's house, It's in the ground. It's been there for a while. It's not a temporary sign. I mean, how permanent is permanent?
What if it's affixed to the house?
Well, I think we were having issue with that with real estate signs, rental signs being affixed to the house and classifying them as temporary signs.
Here's one.
Yeah.
But you could define
see
a
a
permanent
lot.
sign as any sign that's not temporary.
Well, that's pretty much,
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
yeah. But I mean,
So do you regulate by size?
yeah. Does 4 screws screwing in a rental sign, on a house with the rental property below it, does that constitute a permanent sign? I mean, we've got it there. When we get into the table, we'll look at, how Wes has broken it out, but I don't know. I think we kind of need to have, I mean, if you've got a sign defined as a temporary sign, I don't know if all other signs fall into the permanent category or not. I would think that we'd need to define what a permanent sign is. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, can a permanent sign be something that is constructed on some sort of footer or post, embedded in concrete or something?
Well,
of that nature?
I don't know as we need to go to that extent to define it, because a lot of, cottages up and down the beach have names of their house out off of the right of way up into their private property that need to be classified as a permanent sign rather than a temporary sign. So,
I would go back to the definition of temporary. It says that it's intended to display a message of temporary nature. It's not about the structure, it's the message, it's a temporary sign. If you have Southern Shores Realty, the next owner may make that some other company. So that's sort of the transitory to temporary nature. I suppose if you're going following that, then a permanent sign would be one that the message is not temporary. The message is like
Good
Chickahaw.
point.
yeah.
The neighborhood is Chickahaw. So if you go to the message as opposed to the intent, as opposed to the size or affixed or whatever.
Yeah.
So, if I call my house, Rolling Dunes or something, I sell that house, the next person may or may not call it that.
Right.
Yes.
So, if you think of it strictly in whether it's temporary or whether it's permanent, the message.
Would you say we need to incorporate that into the definition of permanent? I mean, you could put a couple of different parameters like, I don't know, attached to or how it's attached.
It's intended to be permanent by the way that it is, perhaps, hints or indications of construction. It's got a big footer. They're not going anywhere. It's, it's of a, the message is basically sort of determinant, but there are other factors that indicate whether the intent is for this sign to be permanent or not.
What would you think, Wes, as far as putting any kind of definition? Because that's where we're at right now, is we're just in the definition side of things. I mean, would you say we should define?
Well, look at what it says for sign temporary.
Yeah.
Means a sign intended to display messages of a transitory or temporary nature.
Right.
So it already says that there.
And a sign like on a department store or a grocery store,
Sure. I mean, that's,
we don't expect that
No.
to change. They do, but that's not the expectation. It's a fairly permanent thing.
so I guess what I'm hearing is we don't really need to define what a permanent sign is.
We can, but I'm not, unless we're gonna require it to be permitted or have some different, stipulation.
Yeah.
I mean, we could be, yes, if you define it, go ahead and define what a permanent sign is, then you could later say that we don't allow permanent signs in the right of way, in the town right of way, unless there's a permit.
Yeah.
If you want to put a permanent sign on your private property, and it's, I guess that's something else.
Yeah.
But
Well,
anyway.
From the staff's perspective, I've never had an issue with trying to distinguish permanent sign from temporary sign.
I wouldn't think it would be something that pops up every week.
It's not.
Okay, well, it just struck me as odd that they define every other kind of sign in here. They define what temporary is, but not what
How about if
permanent
we-
is.
How about if we define permanent at whatever point we decide that
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
important?
maybe
You know, we don't need to define.
Run. maybe run that by Ben and just see what, if he thinks we need to define temporary, would be my suggestion. Or we just let it assume that we've defined everything and, about a sign, but it goes back and says portable signs or any sign not permanently embedded in the ground or not permanently affixed to a building or sign structure that is permanent, embedded in the ground, are considered temporary signs. And then it says a temporary sign is intended for a temporary period. I guess a permanent sign would be intended for a permanent period.
Could you say a time period to define anything supposed to be there for more than 6 months or a year?
I don't know.
It's temporary, and I mean, if it's more than that, it's permanent. If it's less than that, it's temporary.
I think Robert's.
No, because you got like signs that are in people's yards, it's longer than 6 months.
Oh, sure.
I agree with you when you
Yeah.
say they sell the house, then they'll change the
Yeah.
name, so,
Yeah.
or take the sign down. So I don't think you want a time frame.
I just think it needs some type of definition in some regard that would clarify what a temporary sign is, if it means that it's not, you know, if it's not,
But are there restrictions in the statute for permanent signs?
no, yeah, I mean, we're gonna go into the table and look at, permanent signs, but
Okay, then
Just-
let's go,
yeah,
then we'll go back.
Yeah, we're-
When we know we need that definition,
Yeah.
let's go back.
well, I don't want to get stuck on this, so let's move on, but, just below that, the last definition of sign is a vehicle sign, and I think that seems to be pretty straightforward, Wes, as far as, you can allow a sign to be parked out in front of a business if that sign has, registration and license and drives in and out. You just can't park a car that doesn't function anymore and create a sign. So I think we're in good shape there. Okay, well, in part two, and I think this is kind of a catch-all for the intent of what we're trying to do here. The Section 36-165 regulation governing signs, and it goes on to say, the town adopts these standards and regulations to ensure that permitted signs reflect the aesthetics desired by its residents, promotes traffic safety, and provides minimum interference with individual property rights. And then there's exclusions there, and the only exclusions are, everything else is struck. The exclusions are integral, decorative, or architectural features of buildings, moving parts, or moving lights. And then temporary signs of less than 1 day in duration. So I'm going to get Wes to explain what those two exclusions mean.
integral decorative or architectural features of buildings except moving parts or moving lights. Moving parts and moving lights pretty much speak for themselves. The integral decorative or architectural features of buildings. In some cases, folks have something, you know, on the side, on the wall, things that bring your attention to the house, or the architectural feature. I mean, it could be a gable, or it could be
Yeah.
cupola. I mean,
Okay, and then the temporary signs of less than 1 day duration.
any sign less than 1 day duration that meets the definition of temporary sign.
Like a banner, big flag banner out in the commercial area, would that be?
Well, you put up open house signs.
That's
For brokers,
Yeah.
we'll put up open house
Sure.
signs for real estate.
Yeah.
It's up for the day they hold it
Yeah.
open.
The event we're having this week, the surf contest at Chickahaw, I'm sure they'll have, you know, stuff up for the duration of less than 1 day, right? I mean, that would be an example. Okay, and then what got added there was the fence wrap signs affixed to fences surrounding construction sites, basically to satisfy NC General Statute 160D-908. So I think our hands are tied to do much of anything there. And then everything stays from number and area down to the bottom of that page, but the area of a double-faced sign shall be the area of one face of the sign. So you don't get penalized for having a two-sided sign. No permit is required for in residential districts for temporary signs or any sign not exceeding 3 square feet. That sign is 3 square feet is 1.5 feet by 2 feet. I would ask you to clarify that, Wes. We did have a question about that last time, what defined needing a sign permit for, you know, a small sign like that.
For needing a permit for
Yeah,
anything
where-
over 3 square
where-
feet?
Yeah, where it says in subsection 3 on line.
Right, I follow. I'm just asking, your question is about the not exceeding 3 square feet?
Or having to have a sign permit for a sign that exceeds 3 square feet.
It doesn't happen often. I don't really recall having to do that in
No.
in residential districts. I mean,
No.
in the commercial district, everyone pretty much knows, the sign companies especially know that they have to get a permit for
Sure.
signage.
So in the event that somebody wanted a nice big permanent sign in their yard, if it goes beyond 3 square feet, you have to get a permit?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Well, excuse me, no, back up. No permit is required for signs in residential districts.
right.
So any sign not exceeding 3 square feet in area. So I guess in a commercial district, you could have a sign not exceeding 3 square feet in area that would be excluded from having to have a permit.
That should take care of the house sign.
The what?
The house sign, the house name sign.
Yeah.
That'll take care of that, because
Yeah.
they're small, 3 square feet.
Okay.
Andy, I'd like to make just one suggested change to number 4. Material and designs.
Okay.
I think it should say all signs requiring a permit should be engineered, not just,
Yeah.
I don't think you want to engineer every sign.
Yeah, that's a good catch there. And then I guess that would justify a little bit more at the end of the sentence with it shall withstand wind pressures and load distribution as specified in the current building code. I'm not so sure. How many engineered signs have you been a part of, Wes? I mean, you know, a sign like that would need a permit.
3 square foot sign.
Yeah.
Not small, not any small ones,
Yeah,
that's for
okay.
sure.
Well, I mean, it's overkill for sure. But, you know, what John's saying is, we just, if you need a, interject needing a permit, that would be the spot to put it.
I'm sorry, are we in residential only or at least general?
This is just general. We haven't gotten to,
Yeah, I think the permitted will take care of it.
yeah. And then, did we, at our last meeting, Wes, did you have any notes on line 37, subsection 6, about illuminated signs?
No, sir, I didn't.
Well, let's go over to page 5, and it still is going on about prohibited signs from A to J. Let's see. In subsection 6 on line 14, any sign which contains, employs, or utilizes lights or lighting which rotates, flashes, moves, or alternates. And I had C. Finelli there. I mean, does that, you feel like that satisfies what you were concerned about as far as digital
Well,
signs?
I mean, I'm not a big fan of digital signs, but if you are going to allow them, you should allow them to alternate during the day, not every 5 minutes, but for instance, if you have a restaurant, they may want to have a lunch special and then change later in the day to a dinner special or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
So you could say they can't change more often than once every hour, 2 hours or something. I think it accomplishes the intent of what's there.
what do you think, Wes? I mean, is it something that, you know, we should be concerned about as far as zeroing in a little bit more on prohibiting lights that flash or rotate or spin or?
I think what we have in place has stood pretty well over the years. The only sign that I can think of in the town that has lights and moves is the Southern Volunteer Fire Department,
It's where,
Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department.
right, yeah.
And that was, they were allowed to do so through an exception that was inserted into the current code.
Cool.
But otherwise,
What would have precluded them from doing that in the current code without the exception?
that requirement.
Okay.
So a text, a rolling text sign, you know,
I would consider that as subsection F. Utilizes lights or lighting which
Yeah.
rotates.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, like the one at the restaurant there across from PNC Bank, what is, I can't think of the name of the restaurant, but they got flashing lights out there on that sign.
Across from PNC.
Huh?
Oh, you, Argyle?
Argyle's, exactly, yeah. I mean, that would be, and it does, it flashes, it's changing words. I would prefer that if we could legally limit something like that, that we don't have those.
And that's what I believe this does.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
is there a provision in there that limits the brightness or width of the lumens on these signs that?
good question.
Especially at night? Would be a problem, right?
We have an outdoor lighting ordinance. I don't think, I don't recall anything specific in our sign ordinance that addresses how bright the light is. But the outdoor lighting ordinance, I would say certainly would apply.
Yeah, but the outdoor lighting is mostly.
It applies,
These signs are in your face type signs.
the sign, the light ordinance, it applies to any source of light, I'm pretty sure. And it's basically, you can't, in residential districts, you can't have more than 1 foot candle of light at the property line. I couldn't tell you how many lumens that is.
Yeah, and I think if, you know, that, what we've got in here, any sign which contains or employs or utilizes lights or lighting which flash or rotate. I mean, that, if we can eliminate that, then I know what you're saying, Rick, as far as lumens, but I think we're covered on the light, you know,
With this in place,
lighting ordinance with the,
If you go on to Mainland, curb tucking, you know, that's not really blind to,
sure,
you know, rain day or something.
yeah,
Ace Hardware in Currituck.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and once again, I think this would curtail most of that.
I believe so.
Okay.
Let's take a look, maybe we should look at the lighting ordinance. You know, as an aside, let's look at that, you know, when we come back and see if that lighting ordinance will handle, you know, that.
Well, fortunately,
That excessive amount of brightness that.
Yeah, it'd be worth maybe just taking a look at and just see if,
Because casting, I think casting the amount of light out. Will probably.
you're talking about just lights in general or from signs?
signs, sign lights.
He's saying in general.
Well, I'm just saying that I think the lighting ordinance probably is saying if you have something that's lit, it's restricting how many foot candles come out, whether it's a lamp fixture or a sign. I mean, basically the sign is turning into a lamp because it's so bright. Maybe the lighting ordinance will take care of it.
Well, I think that what Andy and I are both saying is subsection F would prevent any such, hopefully prevent such situations.
Yeah, I think it would.
Okay, well, let's move on to number 8 on that page, which is signs permitted. The following requirements apply. And everything going down from 8 to the next page is struck. But on the next page, just looking at some examples that are currently in our ordinance that are proposed to be struck is the square footage of a for lease or for rent sign. They've got it at 3.5 square feet, which I think is pretty adequate. Then the temporary signs not exceeding 6 square feet, that pops up in a table. I think that's fairly reasonable. Obviously, going down, it says the sign shall not be placed in the right of way. You go to page 7. Let's see, subsection D, I had a question there, the retail shopping center. I mean, it's all stricken, so it's kind of a moot point, but does that pertain to, I mean, would that be realistically pertaining to what the marketplace got lighting for? Was that retail shopping center in lieu of the above requirements for signs in the commercial district? Retail shopping centers may have the following on-site signage.
Yes, those are the requirements that they're subject to.
And we're just cleaning some of that language up, eliminating most of it, putting it into the tables, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then moving down to line 28, ice bending structures, automated. I also had highlighted that from our last meeting, and for the life of me, I can't find anywhere where we have allowed an ice bending structure. I mean, is there, where would we put one? I mean, has there ever been a permit issued for one, or anybody coming in wanting to put one somewhere?
Someone came forward and requested a zoning text amendment to allow for them, and they never moved forward with the project.
Where was it?
In the marketplace parking lot
Okay,
is where they were thinking about doing it.
right.
What about, just, suppose the fire department wanted to sell ice on 12 and put one in.
An ice vending structure. I think it has to be a commercial zoning district, so that wouldn't be allowed there.
Okay, moving on down to line 32, non-commercial signs. Subsection A, it says no sign shall exceed 6 square feet in area on each side and shall not be eliminated. That 6 square feet is another number that pops up in these tables that Wes has done. Going on to page 8, everything on page 8 is struck again. Go down to number 12 on line 22, temporary signs permitted in all zones. And it goes on to say the total square footage for temporary signs posted on a lot in all residential zones shall not exceed 6 square feet. 6 square feet, once again, is in these tables. And then at the very bottom, on line 38, subsection E, a temporary sign may be posted for a period of up to 90 days, at which time the sign shall be removed or replaced. So that's 90 days, however you want to do it. I think in the table, it is 90 calendar days. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I don't think that the at which time the sign shall be removed or replaced is in the table.
No, it's not.
I think it just says calendar days.
Correct.
That's it.
And Adam Lovelady said certainly 60 days is the bare minimum. So I think 90 days, we've had it in the ordinance for a long time. It has not been enforced for an even longer time. But I think 90 days is a pretty good number. Let's see. If you flip over to page 9, I guess, Wes. We'll start. If you got any particular order that would work best for continuity in these tables, or you just want to go from A to E?
Let's just go A to E. That's fine.
Okay. You want to give us just a little overview of what table A basically says?
Table A is permanent signage in a residential district for non-residential uses. So this is basically our country club, Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department, church, school. These are all non-residential uses in residential zoning districts. So So it's best to distinguish the non-residential uses versus the residential uses so that the signage, the square footage that has always been allotted to those non-residential uses can continue. And at the same time, we're not allowing the residential uses to have a 64 square foot sign in their yard. So this is mostly to address the church, the school, and the country club, and the fire department.
What about the recreation areas?
Which recreation area?
Hillcrest, Chickahog?
They're residential, that's a residential zoning district. I would say that's a residential use.
Tick-Hawk sign would fall in that, wouldn't it?
That's,
Or would it? No, well, it's a permanent sign in a residential district. for
there's another category for that. Major entrances to subdivisions is permanent signage for residential district and residential uses.
Right.
But Mr. Lawler brings up a good point that we might need to add something for parks or civic association or common area properties. Because there is a sign at Sea Oaks Park I can think of. I think there's a sign at the North Marina. So I don't think anything in here addresses that. So,
And that would be where it would fall in this permanent signage in residential district for non-residential use.
well, at first I was saying it's a residential use, but I guess it could go either way in my opinion.
Well, we certainly want to allow them. And
I think it would fit. I mean, I'm looking at the sign. I can't recall what the square footages are, but looking at them, I think they're probably under the same size restrictions as the ones in Table A, or close to it.
so at this point, what you're thinking, just the fire department, the Duckwoods, and the church
And the school.
and the school, yeah. Well, we got to figure out where to plug the, say Sea Oaks Park sign. That's not 32 square feet, but it's probably in the mid-20s, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, 32 square feet is as big as a sheet of plywood.
So the marina sign would be that big.
Yeah, you're right, yeah. So we just want to make sure that we include those areas that have signage and not make them out of compliance. And then on that table, the maximum height, feet above ground, excluding the support structure. So I'm thinking that the top of the sign, 9 feet seems a little excessive to me.
Yeah, they look better when they're low.
Yeah. I don't know, I'm thinking, I mean, what would the marina sign is probably about 6, isn't it?
Higher than that, I think. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
it's got a pretty good set of legs to it.
Yeah.
And then it's a pretty big sign.
And how about Duckwoods? That one might be a little bit higher too, that big one they have on the road. Duckwoods Country Club.
No, I think the marina sign's probably the tallest one I can think of.
Yeah, that's not that.
What do you think, Wes? The church is fairly low, I believe.
Church is low.
I mean, 6 feet certainly should,
Country Club out by Highway 158 is pretty low.
yeah.
That's what it is.
The other marina signs aren't big.
Mhm.
No.
So, North Marina, because it's got all that
Most of them
stuff.
seem to be
Yeah, a
low
lot of
and
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, what do we think about lowering it to 6 rather than 9?
Just
say
the
low
marina would
6.
have to change.
The marina would have to change.
Or grandfather it in.
Yeah, I would have,
Not be too many more signs going up
Exactly.
in this area, but
Be non-conforming, that's all.
Yeah, it's still, I mean, they're not gonna tear it down,
Right.
be non-conforming, but I still think,
When it blows down, because it's so damn tall.
yeah, that's right, we can lower it.
But
Fight with the boat club. 6, you want to, what do you think? I'm gonna let you do it one time, but generally we do a sign-up sheet and
The maximum number of signs per lot may be problematic for you, say in North Marina or some of these other properties that you speak of.
yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, and I had that circled in red too, was the number. Could that be number of same message signs, or would it just be number in general?
I think it's number in general that,
I mean,
that are subject to the requirements.
if we go back to the last page, the temporary signage, it allows 3. I mean, what would be, I think there's probably 3 signs at the marina, maybe? I can't,
Probably more.
There's a lot.
on the
Yeah,
property.
There's a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot more.
There's the real big sign and then there's smaller signs
Well, what,
scattered about.
yeah, I think they're more directional signs than anything else.
It may be easier to deal with some of this stuff under exclusions earlier on. Pertaining to, parking signs, informational signs.
Yeah,
I mean, at the country club, you got tennis rules, swimming pool rules.
yeah,
In the marina, there's all kinds of rules. And
yeah, just,
so under exclusions may be a better place to deal with it.
what do you think about that, Wes, as far as excluding, I mean, like, maybe make it, too advertising, or not advertising, but just, letting you know what the property is that the sign stands for. And then exclude multiple signs that are directional signs, or I don't know. Where would we put exclusions?
Page 3,
Okay,
36-165-1.
well, how about if we bump the number of signs to 3 in that section in table A, and then work some kind of exclusion for, I don't know, once you get on the site, directional signs, or, like Duck Woods has got,
Okay.
tennis court, swimming pool, golf carts. I mean, there are a lot of signs there, but there's only 2 signs that direct you to the Duck Woods Country Club and let you know that that is.
But I want to say that somewhere in the comments that directional signage would be considered content, would not be content neutral. If you're exempting them, you have to read it to know what it's saying, right?
Yeah, directional and informational signs.
So I think that I don't think we can do that based on the ruling.
So what do we do? Put 15 in that number of signs per lot? I mean, we gotta have something in there.
Unlimited.
put that in on 60.
Yeah. Or just,
But it does, under exclusions, have directional informational signs. I mean, it was struck out, but
Right,
But-
that's why it was recommended to be struck out. I think the town code right might have done it first, I can't recall. But either way, I don't, you would have to read it to make that decision. So I don't think we can do that.
so on this graph that you have, can you put another box that says exclusions?
But how would you word what you're excluding?
he's saying it has to be content neutral in order to apply strictly to Supreme Court case that's pushing us. I'm at a loss. I mean, what would you suggest leaving it at 2 and
I mean, it wouldn't hurt anything leaving it at 2.
yeah, and
It's not going to affect the signs anymore.
no, I think we're looking for a problem that doesn't exist.
I mean, just leave it at 2 and let them keep their signs.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't see any problem there. Just if it ever became a problem, we could try to fix it.
Benign neglect.
Okay. How about the height day? Do we want to dial that down to 6 feet,
I think
5 feet?
Yeah.
Anywhere that'd be problematic other than the marina that you know of, Wes? It's
Not
not
that I
gonna
can
be-
think of at the moment.
Can signs be non-conforming?
They would be grandfathered.
So you
Yeah.
can not get in trouble with the Supreme Court by not enforcing a non-compliant sign.
Not with respect to our own zoning ordinances. I don't think the
Yeah.
Supreme Court's going to interfere.
So if you had a 6-foot pole that you're going to put your sign on, and since a foot is in the ground, it meets the 5 feet height.
Well, from the ground, I mean, it says maximum height feet above grade, but it excludes the support structure. So if you had a 4x4s sticking up, it's the top of the sign, not the top of the
Right.
structure. So
It's just-
I think 5 sounds about right. Anybody? Let's change it to 5, Wes. And then it says sign over there, an additional requirement, sign shall not be internally illuminated. Sign shall be at least 15 feet from a lot line. Sign shall be located outside of sight distance triangles. Anybody got any heartburn about the rest of what that table says? Okay, let's go to table B then. This is permanent signage in residential district for residential uses.
And if I may comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I think that all but one of these categories should be moved to temporary signs. The only sign I think that should be left in this category as permanent signage in a residential district for residential uses is the major entrances to subdivisions. Properties listed for sale, properties listed for rental lease, and properties for, where construction, alteration, remodeling, or demolition of any building or use is taking place, I think all are temporary signs.
Yeah.
When someone has a permit and they're, where alteration, construction, and remodeling, it doesn't go on forever. Properties aren't hopefully for sale or lease forever. Well, we do have rental properties that have been, rented for many, many years. But I guess it could be removed at any time, and then I guess it would cease to be permanent.
Well, I get back to what's permanent. The four screws into the building holding up a Southern Shores Realty sign with the property number on it that's up there for 10 years. Does that count as permanent? I don't know. I think a reasonable person would say it's not really permanent, but it's not temporary.
Right.
What is it? But if we're gonna put a limit, a time duration, which I definitely think we need on signs, then we've got to classify a sign like that as not temporary. It's permanently or semi-permanently affixed to a house.
Or we could just delete the word permanent from the table.
Yeah,
And leave it the way the ordinance currently reads, where it just says temporary signs are this, and then doesn't it say anything about permanent signs? We could easily do that.
yeah, signage in a residential district for residential uses. I mean, that's basically what it is. And I think we're getting muddy in the water trying to label a sign permanent or temporary in a residential district for residential use. So if we did that, and we look back at starting with properties that are actively listed for sale, the maximum number of signs per lot in that table is 1. That's traditionally what happens, is a single sign. The maximum surface area for a single sign going across is 5 feet per side, which a 2.5 by 2 foot sign equates to 5 square feet. Is everybody okay with that? I mean, a typical sign that you see out, a campaign sign, is 3 square feet. Is 5 square feet what we want to shoot for?
Well, if we already have campaign sites that are
Yeah,
already
but they're
3 feet. I mean,
But this is properties that are actively listed for sale.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, this is,
as long as that is what the real estate, in other words, I don't think we want to.
yeah, you had some concern about it, Robert, that you thought maybe somebody might have a little bit bigger sign that,
Yeah, people, I intended to go out and measure several of them, so I didn't get to it, so.
I don't have, I think properties that are actively listed for rent or lease below that is
Right.
3.5 feet per side. I mean, to me, that's a pretty generous size sign. All the Southern Shores and Twitty signs that are on my family's properties are all 3 square feet, that are up on the house advertising that it's for rent. And then I think a 3.5 square foot per side is pretty adequate. I mean, I don't know why we would do it different in one or the other. So I would say dial it to 3.5 feet in that first category, the properties that are actively listed for sale.
The lower end,
Huh?
would 3.5 feet?
Going from 5 feet per side to 3.5 feet per side. And then the maximum height, the feet above grade on a temporary actively listed property for sale, the upper edge at 5 feet is, in my opinion, way too high. Remember, I said, remember the 42 inches that the NCDOT said you can't go any higher in their right of way is 42 inches above grade. I think that's plenty adequate for sale sign. I mean, any thoughts on that? Do we want?
There's an advantage to keeping all the heights at the same, whether someone's got rather than saying, oh, that's the DOT, but over here it's.
No, I think 3.5 feet, square feet is appropriate, and then the upper edge of a sign is, I don't know, 42 inches is 3.5 feet. What do you think? Robert, you know a realtor or two. What, you think they'd be offended if it was 42 inches above the ground?
Yeah, but I just keep all the signs. Not very many of them are gonna do those big signs. Some of them that do, at least if they can keep it under 5, they'll meet up with the other signs. That's what- I like the 3.5 and 5. 3.5 square feet, 5 feet.
I'm gonna disagree with you on the height. I think 5 feet is in the line of sight sometimes. And 42 inches, I don't know where the wisdom came from the NCDOT, but that seems about right to me. And if you look at most signs, they're not even 4 feet up out of the ground.
Does anybody have a tape measure?
This is 32 inches right here, though.
32,
Yes.
yeah. So.
That's
I
desk
mean,
height.
Yeah, true, but if you're on an incline or you're driving, I can see where the 5 feet, and I just look at real estate with the post and the sign. So, I mean, 42 is going to bring it down lower, and with the vegetation and the grasses that we have, I don't see where 5 feet is out of line. And again, it's like Robert says, not everybody uses that type, but what we're doing now is eliminating that possibility. And we do have those big grasses that interferes with signs.
Anybody else want to take a shot at it? What do you think, yeah?
Well, you made the sign smaller, so you let them get it up a little bit higher.
All right, it looks like, John, what do you think? Got an opinion one way or the other?
Oh, I do, but I think I'll stay out of this one.
Come on. Just because you live over there in Martins Point doesn't mean you can't jump in.
I like small signs. I think they serve the same purpose.
Yeah.
But the realtors are gonna want 5 square feet.
Well, I mean, generally, they're all at
It's a
about 3
3-foot
square
sign,
feet.
but then they'll put a rider on the top, which is another foot, and
Yeah,
a rider on the
sure.
bottom, which is another foot.
Yeah.
I like the
Okay,
Village
well-
of Nags Head signs, which are about 1 square foot. but
Yeah.
I'm in a minority.
Well, and from what I'm hearing, I'm in the minority of dropping the height, so we'll keep it at 5 and reduce the square footage to 3.5 square feet.
Everyone agrees?
Yeah.
Should we also list, actively listed for rent or lease as a freestanding sign? Put rent or lease under the same criteria?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. For lease, the maximum height might not be applicable because you're going to be up higher than 5 feet on the,
The next one is talking about wall signs, but the first one.
right.
They could have a freestanding sign that says rent or lease as well.
Yeah,
So you want to kind of lump them all together, I would think.
The rent or lease, they're supposed to be, and you'll see in the other side, shall be placed on the principal building it advertises. So it's not a freestanding, they're not allowed to have freestanding.
Yeah.
signs.
yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
I've seen some freestanding rent signs.
Yeah, but by and large, they're on the buildings, attached to the buildings. So do we want to, you've got, it doesn't apply for the maximum height on that. So that would mean basically that it attaches to the building at some point, but it's going to be above 5 feet. We know that. I think that's fine, really. So then the major entrances to subdivisions, we would classify that in the permanent,
Or just delete the word permanent,
or what?
or delete the word permanent.
The word permanent.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so
But where does major entrance to subdivision check out?
I would leave, you could leave it in there.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's defined. Right?
What's the,
Residential district.
Yeah. Okay. Maximum number of signs per lot, 4. I mean, I don't know.
Well, you could have 4 entrances.
Huh?
You could have 3 or 4 entrances.
Yeah. Trying to think. where that would be, maybe Allard Cove.
Mallard Cove, Chickahawk.
Okay. 32 square feet per side. Again, that's the size of a sheet of plywood. Maximum height above grade, 12 feet.
That should come down.
Huh?
Down.
Yeah. I know. Let's maybe think about lowering that. I mean,
There's a big sign going over the Trinity Bridge on the left that's,
Yeah.
That's a big Chicago sign. How tall is that?
I don't, I was thinking of that too. I can't recall how tall it is.
That's the biggest, that's kind of the biggest one.
going into Chickahawk from Trinity.
Yeah, you know, the landscape, it's got a,
Yeah.
so, that's the thing, what happens if you have that built-up landscape? Is that, you measure from the grade?
Measured from the ground,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you, so.
Measured from the ground adjacent to the sign.
I bet that thing isn't much more than 6 feet.
No,
No, I
it's
bet
6
it's
feet.
taller than the 5, 6.
Yeah.
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 Well, then how about if we cut 12 in half and make it 6? Does that make sense?
And then it's non-conforming again over at Chickahawk?
If they rebuild it, build it.
Okay.
But
Be cheaper to build.
you gotta change the additional requirement in that shall be placed on the principal building it advertises. So that gets scratched out, obviously.
Yeah, it should be. To scratch out building.
Yeah. Or, yeah, shall be.
Yeah,
placed.
that can be removed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you need to put anything in its place.
Has to be on the property of the subdivision, right?
It has to
Right.
be, yeah,
Yeah, just define it as that, I guess.
shall be on the property of the subdivision.
I wonder if that Chickahawk sign is on, it's on the other side of the canal.
Must be
In the
on,
right of way.
must be on property within the subdivision.
And
think works better.
how would we relate that to right of way?
What's good?
Yeah, the Chickahawk signs are in the right of way for sure.
Yeah, most definitely.
That's what
We'll just pretend like we didn't know that. I mean, what are we gonna do?
put your hands over your ears.
I mean, the one there at off of Ocean Boulevard is clearly in right of way. Right in the middle of the road. Traffic island. We're not here to fix things and create problems, but I mean, how do we address something like that? I mean, that sign gets, vandalized, which,
Yeah, plenty of
I mean, they were breaking lights there about every other weekend for a while. Somebody sets fire to it, we're done. What do we do?
what about the height? Did we address the height here? Is it still 12
Yeah,
foot?
no, we went to
6.
6 feet on the height. Any suggestions there, Wes? Or just not address what's in conflict?
I mean, you all could create an exception. I mean,
How about we accept all existing signage that happens to be in town right of ways? Permanent signage, permanent.
if the town, I
No,
mean,
we don't have permanent anymore.
we have the authority, as we went over earlier, we have the authority to regulate signage in town right of way. And those signs have been there who knows how long.
Yeah,
So I think we would want to honor that. And if we wanted to create an exception in this box that says for major entrances to subdivisions, you could say such signs may be allowed in a town right of way. And just leave it at that.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Y'all like that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the town manager would have any objection.
Where your cameras at?
Advertising?
You had certain signs that were in the right of way that, at some point, a date down the road, you get to be compliant.
I don't even know where they would put it.
But I don't know how you do that, those signs you reference. No, you'd probably be doing more damage to the community to take that sign up because it's a marker. I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there would be a number 5. It says such signs shall be allowed in the town right of way.
You go to the part that say existing? Existing?
Such,
Yeah.
such existing
Yeah.
signs shall be allowed in town rights of way. No the, so such existing signs shall be allowed in town rights of way.
All right. You okay on that, Wes?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody want to take a break? 5 minutes?
You want a sucker?
Hey, I'm gonna go get a drink of water. But let's break for about 5 quickies. Come right back.
Okay.
Oh, the legs are going.
Yes, my knees.
table B?
I think we may need to consider adding something, discussion with the town manager. We may need to add something that addresses the house names, signs for house names.
Uh-huh.
Might be good to go ahead while we're at it, to put something in here to address them. In most cases, the name is on the house. I can think of a couple where there's a sign out by the driveway.
I can name more than a couple.
Yeah.
Would you allow both? I don't know, where would you put it in the ordinance?
It would be signage in residential district for residential uses. It would be in table B.
But I mean, in table B, we're talking about rental property, for sale property, construction situations, construction site, and then major entrances to subdivisions. So where would we plug that in as far as we would designate it as a,
We would create a new, I would put in a new block, under that first column, type of residential use. I would say single-family dwelling or vacation cottage. And then you would come up with the maximum number, surface area, height, etc. That would be my suggestion.
and
Is it
not.
one or the other, or like, in other words, if you're gonna have it on the house, or you can have it out on the street, but you can't have both?
That's a good question.
Well, nobody would generally do that, I don't think. I mean, I think it would be, I think what our concern is that what we would think of more of a permanent sign that's embedded in the ground with the name of their house
Or
is
to be,
being classified a temporary sign, when in fact it's more of a permanent sign in nature. Right?
so it would be a category, it was something to the effect of signage posted on single-family dwellings or erected on properties announcing the name of well, you would have to read that to make that determination. So that's going to be difficult. So it would, going back, you would just have to say single-family dwellings and vacation cottages.
Yeah, I don't know how you get a sign that has the name of a cottage or a house on it and differentiate between a protest sign as far as permanent versus temporary. So
I'll have to give
that's
that
your challenge.
I'll have to give that some thought. Yes,
Okay.
sir. And the question is, how do you make it content neutral?
Right. I think you'd have to classify it as a permanent, you may have to create a whole nother table for just one application, but it would be basically a permanently affixed sign that has the name of a house or a vacation cottage or a house in a single-family residential area, RS1. That's all I can think of. But I think you're gonna have to call the name of someone's house a permanent type sign in order to be able to put a restriction on number of days a temporary sign can stay out.
We'll have to come back to that one.
Okay. Well, I've had, I don't want to make these folks endure having to sit here and listen to more sign stuff, but if it's okay with the board here, Ms. Sherlock just would like to ask a couple of questions about what we're doing signage because it's really kind of hard to follow, to be able to put a sign out, a campaign sign out here in Southern Shores. And rather than make them stick around for the end of public comment, to interject, would you all have objection to have her speak to us? Anybody? You okay with that, Wes? Ms. Charlotte?
I have kind of a soft voice, so I'm going to take the mask off for a second. My name is Paula Sherlock, and I'm here along with my husband Ike, and we live at 66 Ocean Boulevard. And along with several others, I'm a candidate for an office here in Southern Shores. And you may or may not know there was a little bit of a sign kerfuffle last week as signs started going up. And my apologies to Wes, who had to tour around Southern Shores and pull up many of our signs. But I learned a lot last week. First of all, Wes taught me how to use the Dare County GIS site, so we can now print out property maps and put an overlay of the right-of-way. And you may already know this history. I really didn't, and I assure you a lot of these homeowners didn't understand this. For instance, the heads on North Dogwood Trail found out that the right-of-way in the Southern Shores right-of-way extends 29, almost 30 feet through their front yard, almost to their garage door. The Salmons on Holly Trail found out their right-of-way is 14 feet on one side and 41 feet on the other side. They've got a corner lot. One on 24 Hickory Trail, the right-of-way there is 10 feet. Claudia Higgins and Skip on North Dogwood, their right-of-way is 35.5. So as homeowners began to put out yard signs, they assumed they were putting them out of the right-of-way because they were away from the road. And if you ask most of those homeowners where their right-of-way is, they would say 15 feet from the edge of the road, 30, everybody thinks they know it. Well, in Southern Shores, they don't know it. And I understand it has something to do with Frank Stick's love of trees and not wanting to build highways if he could avoid cutting down a tree. But so as you do sign ordinances and as they impact property owners, I hope you'll be mindful of the fact that these sign ordinances are going to impact people pretty disproportionately. For instance, can they put up a Christmas sign? Can they do a happy birthday? My kid is in kindergarten. I love ECU. You're really impacting the ability of certain homeowners to freely express their opinions. And again, it's going to be disparate in the community simply because some people have very narrow right-of-ways and some people have large right-of-ways. I don't really know what you do about this. I doubt that you can go back and reconfigure the right-of-ways at this stage in the game. But I'm just asking you to be mindful of it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Wes, how well are the utilities placed with the very right of way? I've always said, oh, well, wherever the water meter is on the telephone or cable box is, they have to put them on the right of way.
It's a pretty good reference. It's not always 100% accurate, but it's usually a pretty good reference.
So they keep up with the strange disparities that you pointed out.
Who, the utilities?
Mhm.
Like I said, I'm sure it's not exact in every situation, or there's probably some differences, but generally speaking, you can usually look at a panel box or pedestal utility, like, there's electric pedestals or a water meter, and that's usually pretty close, but I wouldn't say it's always the case. I can't speak as to the preciseness of how the utilities were installed.
Well, one thing we know is that it's all over the place in Southern Shores. I mean, it's just not indicative to, one street. It's right away. People just have no idea unless they've recently had their property surveyed. I mean, we ran into it with the path going up East Dogwood to the south, and people were shocked to see where their front yard was off of Dogwood Trail.
Right.
And I mean, we do have to be mindful of it, and I guess from a town perspective, Cliff, is how strict moving on do we enforce stuff like this? If you're 2 feet away from the pavement on a Southern Shore street, that's pretty egregious. Thinking that your sign's okay there, you certainly need to be back a bit farther, but how, situations like Ms. Sherlock said, what kind of enforcement are we looking at going forward?
Practically, it's, as she points out, it's nearly impossible to go and see technically where the right-of-way line is, but from the enforcement standpoint, I think it was pointed out about, 99 out of 100 times the water meter and the power pole are gonna be in the right-of-way.
Yeah.
And those, from an enforcement standpoint, if those signs are street word of those markers, then they're in the right-of-way. And that's about as consistent as we can get.
Yeah.
Now, moving forward is, remember, signs are signs. We're right in the middle of the campaign, so we're talking about campaign signs. There's no difference,
Right.
as far as the code says. I mean, we technically have to pick up, all of those signs that are in the right of way. And that's, what the code says we should be doing. But to move forward, if there's a way that citizens can better understand, then maybe it is more defined X amount of feet off the side of the road.
My suggestion,
Because we can measure that.
yeah, well, my suggestion would be that we, put some sort of, common sense, 7 or 8 sentences or a table or something, letting candidates at election time know that this is, what is required, because this is a slack election year. This year, there are 5 candidates running in Southern Shores. But moving forward, next year is going to be a different story. 2022 election, we'll have all kinds of signs in election time. I just think we need, as a town, what you all sent out the other day was, it was pretty thick as far as trying to pick through and figure out what to tell your volunteers that are putting your signs up here in town, where these right-of-ways are and how to comply. So moving forward, maybe in the newsletter next time around, get fairly concise with what we need to do as far as campaign signs go. And like you said, they're only up for 90 days max. That's 3 months. There's 12 months in a year that, all other signs that are content neutral have to apply. So I don't know as we want to try to go, reinvent the wheel as far as where the right of way starts and stops, but we got to figure out something.
Where the missing stuff. So NCDOT allows for political signs in their right of way as long as the property owner that's adjacent permits that. The Southern Shores have that same stipulation. No signs are allowed in public right of way in the Southern Shores.
And DOT's on shaky ground for allowing, only political signs in the right of way. Right?
Well, yeah, if you walk up to 2 signs in the DOT right of way, you take one and you leave the other.
Yeah, they're, I don't know, but we need to,
But like you said earlier, it's the DOT right of way.
right, yeah.
Well, err on the safety issue. I mean, obviously, it's been brought up that the right-of-way is cattywampus, so you can't go on that. But if you had a 20-foot, measurement from the road, which would be a safety for driving and that type of thing, and just make it standard. The signs are within, 20 feet of the road with, the owner's permission.
Possible, or 15 even, I mean,
Right.
just,
Whatever's safe.
I don't know, I mean, do you see any issue, Cliff, with doing just a blanket footage from the road pavement? I mean, the DOT says 3 feet from the road pavement in campaign season. That seems absurd to me, that you can put a sign 3 feet from NC 12, but it's allowed.
I'm wondering if a buffer, if the town could establish a buffer of 5 feet adjacent to each, to the paved area, that for the purposes of temporary signs are considered town right of way. And that the town allows signs in the town right of way past that buffer with the permission of the adjacent property. So I can put one in my yard, as long as it's 5 feet off the pavement. And if it's in the right of way, the town says fine. If it happens to be on my property, it's my decision.
Well, I think we need to go with a
10 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, you got
Higher.
sidewalks, you
Yeah.
have an area, a buffer, then you have a sidewalk. So by going by the 20 feet, at least you get on the other side of the sidewalk. So everybody walking their dogs aren't running all over the signs. I mean, just look at a safety issue and aesthetic looking.
Start the pavement, start the buffer wherever the farthest paved area is, because most of us don't have sidewalks. And where there is one, then you go in 10 feet. If there's not one, it's 10 feet from the sidewalk.
There you
I mean,
Well,
5 feet.
for what we're discussing tonight, as far as doing signage, I mean, can't remember exactly where it is in here, but there's a proposal to do the right-of-way plus 5 feet, right?
Yes, sir, setbacks.
Where is
For
that?
some of them.
Where does that say that? I've lost it.
D, permanent signage in the government institutional districts. Signs should be placed outside the street right of way and at least 5 feet from all lot lines.
I thought it was in temporaries.
Yeah, temporary signs shall be placed outside the right of way and at least 5 feet from all lot lines.
That's on the last one, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Table E.
Yeah.
Number 2.
I mean, that's,
I don't think that works in a town that was developed with the southern shores.
Right,
No,
so
that-
right of ways are all different.
I think you could regulate time, manner, and place. So if the place is 10 feet off the edge of the pavement, and time, you can go so far as to regulate kind of the way DOT does, but if you do, you allow wall signs, X amount of time before the campaign, X amount of time after the voting. You could do that, but I don't see why you couldn't limit or say signs, the town permits signs in the right of way, 10 feet off the edge of pavement. I don't see why you couldn't do that if that's what.
Yeah, that's what we want.
well,
Whatever, 10, 12, whatever.
I know at my house, I measured it the other day, and I went from the edge of the pavement to the phone pedestal and the meter box in the ground, and on average, both of those were about 13 feet from the edge of the pavement back. I don't think that's, was too bad. It's not, the signs aren't right out there at the roadside, but they're back. I'd probably, say 14 feet, 15. I mean, we got to pick a number is what you're saying.
That's what it sounds like.
The only potential issue I could see is that if you just say the town allows signs in the right of way up to 10 feet from the edge of pavement, I mean, I think you would still need to do what was discussed earlier and what's mentioned in one of the other ones, about having permission from the adjacent property owner. Otherwise, somebody say, I can just go anywhere and put it. What if the right of way is not 10 feet and it's actually somebody's property? Somebody would be thinking that they could just put the sign on there, not knowing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that
So-
would have to be stipulated as, just like it's stipulated in the NCDOT signage. I mean, it's in
And
that
it's-
statute that says you have to have property owner.
And it says that in temporary signs. Temporary signs must have the lot owner's permission.
Yeah,
So we would need to add something similar to that.
yeah. In table E, exactly what Wes said, item 4, temporary signs must have the lot owner's permission, regardless of if they're fully in the property or in the right of way. So if we can settle on a number that off of the pavement, I think it would be a lot more reasonable to be able to, it would make your job easier enforcing it.
Yes, sir.
They're just easier too.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
15.
I like 15. I think 15 off the pavement. I mean, and we're not talking about just campaign signs here. We can't even be talking about just doing it for campaign signs. This has got to be for all signs. Yeah. 15 feet off the property line makes
From
sense.
edge of pavement, you mean?
I mean, off the pavement, sorry.
Edge of pavement?
Yeah,
That would include real estate for sale signs, or am I going down?
I think so. I don't see anything. I mean, yeah.
They're temporary as well.
Otherwise, it's 15 feet from the house, garage, like you said.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
generally, you would see a real estate sign. I mean, they're pretty dialed into getting them, off the right of way, fair amount, but 15 feet seems like a pretty decent number to me.
I mean, I think in order to avoid having to say, well, does it apply to this sign or apply to that sign?
No, we wouldn't do that at all.
You wouldn't do that. You would just say all signs must be at least 15 feet from the edge of pavement.
Yeah, and that would
A
include
minimum.
someone's house sign on a vacation
And permission.
cottage
And you get permission from them.
and you have to, well, you'd leave that clause in, temporary signs that must have the lot owner's permission, regardless of if they're on the property or in the right of way.
I'm thinking maybe create like either a new table or just another subsection that says like general requirements for signs. And then just say, have that part about 15 feet from edge of pavement, having to acquire the owner's permission. Not sure, I'll have to look and see what's the best way to put that in here.
Okay, well, now, let me ask you this, Cliff and Wes. If we decide on 15 feet tonight, obviously, we ain't changing any of this until after the election's over with, because we're not gonna get to finish this up tonight. Would you, as a town, be willing to let the 5 candidates know that the planning board has agreed on a 15-foot requirement from the pavement and that it won't be enforced? I don't know. What do you think? I mean, is that a slippery slope?
Well, it's a little, let me say this, yes, absolutely. If we can measure 15 feet, and, I mean, that's practically, like I said, what we're doing anyway, absent of survey.
Yeah.
We have to pick a line, and that's the pole, either the utility pole or the water meter. So technically, I don't know that we're enforcing ordinance to the letter of the law. But I think put something out there that says that.
Okay, well, I think that would be a good common sense approach to the rest of this campaign season, so you're not steadily out yanking signs up, and then by next year this time,
Yeah.
we'll have it dialed in
Right.
way better, and we'll get it out to the county, Republican, Democrat parties, and all the candidates are, running next year. And I think it'll make, our job a lot easier.
I mean, I would have to say that, I feel obligated to say that I think the town council should have to weigh in on that matter.
Yeah. When do they, let's see, they don't meet again till.
They meet October 5th, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. We're just an advisory board here. We're not here to set law. This-
We can say that
You could recommend that. Yes, sir, absolutely.
our recommendation.
Well, I guess that's what we're doing de facto. We're recommending it. I mean, what do we need to do we need to put it in the form of a motion and
No.
I think it's just a unanimous recommendation from the planning board. But I don't
I mean,
know.
that's gonna bear on whatever you send to the council anyway. I mean, if you put that in the recommendation for it. But I don't know that it covers me, if you're doing it to cover me.
Can we recommend to the council that for this season, enforcement is
Well, that's what we're,
X, Y, Z?
Yeah, I think you should.
We recommend this level of enforcement of the current ordinance.
well, we've got 2 more weeks before council meeting. That's quite a few more campaign signs going down. I don't know. I mean, it's, you guys are the enforcers, not us.
Yeah, I'll have, if I do it tomorrow, I'll have to answer to them one way or the other, so.
I don't think, I'd be surprised if there was any resistance.
Yeah.
Because it's
I agree. I think
completely reasonable of an ask. So do what you got to do.
And I have a question about the days. I thought the signs or campaigns were 30 days prior and then 10 days after. So it would be a 40-day limit, not 90
It's
days.
the first day of early voting for the,
Right, 30 days.
yeah, but,
And gotcha,
and that equates,
gotcha.
I
There
think
you
it
go.
started September 14th and goes to 10 days after the election.
So it's
November
30 days
12th.
prior to September 14th.
Right, so that, I mean, for general thinking, that's 60 days.
Right.
And
Gotcha.
if we're content neutral, we're not talking about campaign signs, we're doing 90 calendar days for any sign, then technically, we don't worry about when a campaign sign goes out. By all rights, they could have gone out in July,
Correct.
right? And they can, moving forward, they can go out in July.
Now, is there a caveat there, Wes, if we're threatened by a tropical storm or anything like that, that they need to go and get their signs up? I mean, I'm just looking common sense. You would want, all this stuff to come up before it gets all blown. Is there any caveat when they put in a sign that if you're warned that there's a tropical storm approaching, that they have to pick up their signs?
There isn't anything currently in place for that.
There's not, okay. I mean, I just, when we're
Yeah.
here planning,
Oh, yeah.
Because unfortunately, they land in the canals.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that you all can't recommend something to that effect. I'm just saying, your question was currently, no, there is no caveat for that.
Okay.
The adjacent property owner that permitted that sign should be
Yeah.
responsible for securing it.
And you would hope that the person running for office would have
Oh, I
enough
agree with all
pride into
that. The
what
only
they're.
thing is there's no pressure to do
No,
it unless it's
And
mandated.
it gets worse in, state and national elections. Right now, local 5 candidates, this is like throwing up a trial balloon for what we really want to try to do as a town to curtail some signage that hasn't been regulated. I think we're on the right path.
So, Cliff, you said I'm sorry, you said there are no signs allowed in public right of way, in the town's street right of way?
That's right. But there's some exceptions, but other than those exceptions, their signs are not permitted in the town right away.
Well, moving on,
They're there, and they should, I mean, we have to enforce it. You ride through downtown, you probably see some, but we try to enforce it.
well, if we move on from this discussion, we're not going to get through with what we need to get through for all the signage tonight, much less produce stands and trash collections.
Let's go home and eat some burgers.
Well, yeah, I would say, if we can just look, if we can skip over C and D and look at the last table, the temporary signage, and just see if we're okay on basically what that's talking about. Because that is the temporary signage that is in residential districts that will affect probably 90% of what we do as a town on signage. So, maximum number of, and these are all temporary signs, maximum number of signs per lot. 3. We okay on that? The maximum surface area for a single sign, 6 square feet seems a little excessive to me for just a general old, go to hell sign that somebody might want to put out. I don't know. I mean, 6 square feet, is that too much, too little?
3, 6, so it's 2.5, 4, 5. Yeah, that's not real big.
No, I mean, it's 2 feet by 3 feet.
Yeah.
Anybody down this end?
Yeah, it should be small.
I like it smaller. I don't see anything wrong with, the protest signs that have been out in the past are the same size as a campaign sign. They're 1.5 feet by 2 feet, 3 square feet in total. We've said 3.5 square feet for other signs in the, the rental stuff and the property stuff. So I would say 3.5 would be.
This also is graduations and happy 50th.
Yeah,
happy
they're
70th,
all
like this small
1.5,
stuff.
but they're 3 square feet. I
Gotcha.
guarantee you, 99% of those
So
signs
just
are.
make it consistent.
Yeah, so if we make it consistent, like Linda says, let's shoot for 3.5 feet in that block.
Oh, that height.
And then maximum height, freestanding sign is 5 feet. Did we leave that at 5?
Yeah,
So that's okay. The maximum duration per calendar year, that is the number of days, not,
we must have discussed it. I had it
Wait.
crossed and put 90 on that to correspond with the other.
well,
Isn't
in the previous,
It was.
or in the ordinance
Yeah.
that's in effect right now, it says 90 days. But you
It's
could.
not
you could-
consecutive days, right?
Right, you could put it in the ground for 89, pull it up and put it
down.
back down for another 89. This says one sign, 90 calendar days. Everybody okay with that?
Mhm.
Does that conflict with the definition of a temporary sign?
That would be in the category of a temporary sign. I mean, that's table E is temporary signage.
Yeah, but then I go back to the definition of temporary signs and they seem to conflict.
I don't know.
Well, it was crossed off. It says a temporary sign may be posted for a period up to 90 days, at which time the sign shall be removed or replaced.
I'm not sure I understand
It
what it
gets
would.
back to like for sale sign or something, or room for rent.
Well, Wes is gonna have to blend table E into table B because we scratched out permanent in table B and just said signage in residential districts for residential uses. And I would think there would be considerable bleed over into those two tables. Table E is simply temporary signage, but the first heading up there is residential districts. So I don't know how you combine those two tables or what, but
I'm gonna have to play with it a little bit. I think.
yeah, okay. I mean, you have to lock the temporary signage in with the signage in residential districts for residential uses. You can figure that out fairly easy, I bet.
I will try.
But yeah, I get where you're coming from there.
Yeah, I'm
As
not
far-
sure how many, you get temporary signs, you have permanent signs. I don't know if there's a third category in the middle.
Semi.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's why I kept hammering for a definition of permanent sign, but maybe something will spring forth before we go at it the next time, so. But as far as that temporary signage goes, in that first section, the residential districts, we're good on the number. We're gonna change the surface area to 3.5 square feet per side. We're gonna keep the 5 feet in height, and the maximum duration per calendar year or number of days is 90. And then that temporary sign should be placed outside the right of way and at least 5 feet from the lot line. We're gonna scratch that and come up with 15 feet in some
Pavement.
way, shape, or form from the pavement, right, Wes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, dropping down to all other districts, what would that be?
Temporary signs in commercial zoning district or GNI zoning district,
Okay. So,
like the vacant Southern Shores Realty lot where they sometimes have.
right. Maximum duration per calendar year in that category was 30 days. Was there what was the thought behind?
This carrying forward was currently allowed now, except it doesn't say calendar days. It just says maximum, you can have it up for 30 days, I believe, is what it was.
I mean, I don't think that's unreasonable for a temporary sign of that in that area. Okay. All right. Anybody have anything else on that table? And if it's okay with everybody, we can come back to, yeah, Rick?
Yeah, on the top, on both the tables on the additional requirements, you just restrict yourself to temporary signs not be illuminated or painted with light reflective paint. With today's stuff out there, maybe you should have any type of reflective material, because you have reflective decals, reflective tape, everything. So, why limit yourself to just paint?
Yeah. Maybe make that addition as far as,
It would say temporary signs shall not be illuminated or painted with light reflecting paint or other light reflecting.
light reflecting material.
Reflecting materials, yeah.
Yeah, good catch, Rick. Thanks. But if it's, I think Table C and Table D. Table D is pretty cut and dried, so, I mean, this is all basically coming out of what's being allowed right now, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Table D.
With respect to table D, in the first category, it says use type at the top. It should not say use, it should say sign type. I'll make that change, but I just wanted to tell you.
Say that again.
On bottom of page 11, look down here.
Okay.
It
Page
says
11?
Right there, it says use type.
Oh, yeah.
That should say sign type to be
Okay.
consistent with the others, and we're not regulating the,
Right.
yeah, so. That'll be sign, when you see this again, it'll have sign type,
Okay.
as well as at the top of page 12.
And basically, that's fire department and EMS station. Where would that be? Here?
I'm sorry?
I say the areas of government institution.
G&I, the G&I zoning district is just this town hall complex property.
Okay, not, the fire department doesn't,
Fire department is R1 residential.
okay. So that's nothing too out of the way in table D.
No, sir.
Yeah. What do you think about, let's let Wes settle into what we've talked about tonight, and we come back ready to talk old business again, and we'll take up table C, which we haven't gone over at all. And Wes, how can we, what do we need to do to postpone our discussion on the other two items on the agenda for new business?
You can just table them until a later meeting,
Okay,
I would say.
well, I would move that we table, what is it? Discussion of potential requirements for produce stands in the commercial zoning district, which is under new business, and also a discussion of potential amendments to Town Code Chapter 26 solid waste for the next meeting.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay. Well, I want to read one brief thing before we roll out of here tonight, and kind of been working with Cliff some and Wes some, and just kind of jumping in and out of, my personal beliefs versus my actual role sitting up here as chairman. And I didn't mean for it to go into an official capacity when I contacted the SSCA. I had said something to Tony, and he was far enough removed from it. He used to be the president of the SSCA to even give me any guidance. So I kind of hunted Jeff Johnson down. I don't know if you all know Jeff or not, but he's the president of the SSCA. And I just approached him as a citizen. I'm not acting in any capacity trying to lean on him for anything. But we talked about the SSCA properties and their requirement, if they had any, or any language in the bylaws that spoke to campaign signs on the SSCA property. He knew of none, and so I had a suggestion for him as a private citizen, not speaking for you all or anybody else in town, but he canvassed his board about the sign restrictions that I was kind of seeing if they existed in the properties, which I said they did not. So anyway, I'm going to read you what he sent to all 5 candidates, 2 of which were here tonight. And he said, at the request of the town planning board, I wish he wouldn't have said that because I didn't request that as the town planning board, but the SSCA reviewed its policy on allowing the placement of signs, political, commercial, and otherwise, on the various SSCA properties in Southern Shores, and has told the planning board and the town manager that it does not allow them. They ask that we communicate that to you. In order to manage its properties, including all of the beach crossovers, the SSCA must place its own mini signs and would ask that you respect our policy to help protect the appearance of the community. If you have any questions, I'm happy to talk with you. Thanks, Jeff Johnson, SSCA president. So in essence, what I was aiming for was just the triangle parking lot. It's like a magnet there for signs. So it must have been 50 to 75 signs out there in that particular spot. So what this does is if someone wants to put a sign in the right of way there, which is state maintained road, they have to go to the SSCA to ask for permission. And they have voted as a board not to allow permission given on any SSCA properties for any signs, campaign, business, or otherwise. So I think it's a big step in the right direction to make our town less clutter-free around election time, but at any other time as well. And I appreciate Jeff Johnson for his effort in it, and thanks to Cliff for shooting an email back and forth with me, telling me what I should or shouldn't do. I've taken his guidance. Anyway, that's my planning board member comments. Anybody else have anything? Jan? Yeah. All right, well, it's that magic time here. Announcements.
Yes, sir. We do not have any pending applications with you all other than the town initiated the items that were on the agenda tonight.
Okay.
We haven't received anything from anyone else. Next meeting will be Monday, October 18th.
$5:30.
Whichever time you all prefer.
Anybody got a preference? I mean, I don't mind 5.
Does it matter if it's fast?
Yeah, are you, does it?
I'm 5 or 5:30, whichever you all prefer. I mean, 5 works for me.
Let's say 5 then, 5 o'clock. I mean, it's on the calendar for 5:30 till.
It is, but it says, there's a thing that says subject to change.
Yeah, okay. All right, 5 o'clock, October 18th.
Were there any other public comments? No? No?
Rick, thank you for participating tonight, and promise to get you up here the next time somebody drops out.
That's fine.
Okay, thanks a lot. And what's your name, sir?
John Bird.
Thank you. Hope we didn't bore you too much. Okay, well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
First, second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, no. Meeting's over. Thank y'all.
I know.
All right, let's get